Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third episode of Liferaft Security Spotlight, where today we'll be discussing strategies for securing major sporting events. My name's Jen. I'm the customer success team lead here at Liferaft, and today I'm joined by our expert, John Mulligan. John is a senior advisor for intelligence with Rebel Global Security. He's a 39-year veteran of the U.S. intelligence and national security community. And during his time in government, John provided direct support to several Olympics and international sporting events. His knowledge of intelligence and support to event security encompasses physical, cyber, information domains, as well as he understands successful event security and how it's constructed, consolidated, and concealed. Thank you so much for joining us here today, John.
Jen, hi. Thanks very much for that lovely intro. Looking forward to talking to you.
Amazing. Well, thank you. So, John, to kick it off, let's go back a little bit. So, you have supported the Olympics, international sporting events, and I would assume some of that might be the World Cup that a lot of us are looking forward to in 2026. But honestly, can you tell us how nervous you were when you were taking on that responsibility for the first time, knowing that the world is watching?
To be very honest with you, not very nervous, more focused. You get nervous in a lot of the preparatory times, and you get nervous, when you face sort of challenges in your preparation. But by the time it's game time, it's all about focus. So that's kind of where I think everyone is at. The only nervousness you might feel is I don't want to be the person making a grievous mistake. So that's probably it. But I would really say the overwhelming feeling is it's on. Let's go.
That's incredible. It sounds like you're the right person for the job. So amazing. Now, John, I think when we think of event security and game security, there's almost two different types at the risk of oversimplifying. We have the marathon versus the sprint. So multi-day events like the Olympics or single day events that we might think of the Super Bowl. How would you say that these events differ in security preparedness?
I really like that example, and it is very, very different. The one thing that the distinction I would make is that the Olympics, the World Cup, these are tournament activities, and a number of other big sporting events are tournament activities. And in these tournament activities, the preparation is very, very lengthy. You've levied a bid, you've made a challenge or a request to be granted the permission to host this, and your security planning, at least at the very top high level, has begun already. And so it becomes, from the moment that bid is secured, the security process and the readiness is so much more prolonged than it is for some of your single events. Now, not to be wrong, there's also a bid process for the Super Bowl. And again, that's another one where you have to identify those, your readiness at the outset. But let's just talk for one moment about sporting events like professional sports. Those events, while they're happening with far greater frequency, there still has to be a very high level of preparation that goes into those. And even though if it seems like it's repeating itself on each iteration, there are always the variables that are changing with those sporting events that security leaders need to take into account.
That's so interesting. Now, when we talk about a lot of these different events, I think one thing that we're cognizant of is that these are such an attractive target for bad actors. Do you have any insight as to why these events are just that attractive target?
Well, they're ample. Okay, one of the primary objectives, and let's just say you're a terrorist, one of the primary objectives is they amplify the event. Because of the fact you've got large crowds, because of the fact you've got media coverage. The event in itself is a ready-made messaging conveyance. So that's for terrorists. If you're criminals, the large number of potential victims. So there are a number of different factors that come into account. But I think one of the most important factors, particularly those who are trying to send, if you will, communicate some kind of political or terrorist message, is the fact that these are ready-made and you can capitalize on that on that environment. And so that's what I think is really kind of what the attraction is. As you've seen in other instances, not just in sports, but in other types of, how can I say it, high threat environments, there may not be the level of ready-made media coverage that sports in particular have to offer.
Absolutely. That visibility is such a crucial piece, really echoes their whatever their messages they're forwarding. Absolutely. Now, what would you say that security professionals need to start preparing for ahead of the event, ahead of the game?
The most important thing the most important recommendation that I could make is don't be overwhelmed by the enormity of the task. If I could just talk for one moment, like if you look at one Olympics keeps trying to outdo another, right? Similarly with the World Cup. I mean, these are just examples, but every event manager has an objective to make each event grander, each event more innovative, each event more novel. And security professionals need to be able to try and accommodate those aspirations as responsibly as possible. You don't want to be the wet blanket, but you want to bring to, if you want to the conversation, the really critical security aspects. So things that they need to start focusing on when presented with a challenge for some new or unexpected athletic event is they need to first, what are the goals? What are the goals of the organization? What are our specific security goals in supporting that? What things do we need to take into account that we probably hadn't before? A greater number of access points, a greater number of, if you will, crowd controls, things of that nature, and step through them. And the second thing they need to do, and this is really important, they need to figure out what the budget is going to look like, because they're not going to be able to proceed unless they are able to make the case with their leadership, make the case with their national leadership, if they are a country, about this is what it's going to cost to have us securely conduct this event. Then they need to start thinking about how do I bring in all of these different aspects of our security requirements, and how do I build an integrated system so that we can be on top of things, so that we will know what's going on and how we can share that information as efficiently as possible. Then we need to think about how are we going to implement this plan? What is the practicalities of it? How many people do we have? Do we need to bring in more people? Do we need to be doing more training? Okay. And then again, the information sharing. What is our response regimen? You can see how even when I step it through, the list starts growing larger and larger. The key for the security professionals, particularly those who are overseeing the event, is to break it down into edible pieces so that they are able to, again, process each part of it, bringing in expertise where necessary and applying their own organizational strategy where it makes sense. And then finally, at the end, you review. And if you can, you try and practice or conduct either tabletop exercises or real world exercises so that your team feels a sense of collective readiness before the event begins. And I mean, we could go on each of those areas for length, Jen, but that's just, if you will, the overall starting point for security professionals.
There's such complexities, not only with how many people need to be involved in what you just shared, but when does this need to start happening in order to rope in every stakeholder, get those decisions made? How long should teams start to be preparing in advance of this?
Okay, in an ideal situation, months. In a less ideal situation, weeks. I mean, generally speaking, for really large scale activity, I mean, here's an example. You're a corporate security officer, and suddenly your leadership comes in and tells you, hey, guess what? We're going to be participating in a fan fest, which is a relatively new development, lots of peripheral activities around stadiums. And then you get the task of work with everyone to try and secure that fan fest thing that we have going on, or that activity, or that promotional activity with a direct tie to this event. And so you have to move out as quickly as you can. Now, the good news is, generally speaking, with the events themselves, there's been an establishment of partners that you can reach out to, that the planning for the events, the high level planning has been going on for some period of time. And so there should be counterparts to start engaging with. But you really need to move out as quickly as you learn about your responsibilities. The Olympics for 2028, that planning has been well underway since Los Angeles was announced as a site. I will also share with you, and this is an interesting thing that folks should be aware of, many of the security folks in that event would have been participating in France 24. There is a tradition in a lot of these events that they bring in folks from prior events to sit side saddle with the professionals running the current event. And then they in turn will bring in the next iteration so that the level of preparation gets adequate long-term emphasis, and they can see close at hand what the event actually looks like.
Incredible. I love that insight. That's incredible. Now, moving in a different direction in our conversation here, I want to share a stat from the 2025 Spectator Sport and Safety and Security Research Report to tee up the next part of this conversation. So 74% of spectators consider safety and security precautions when attending events. But what I also think is important to note is that about 1/3 of fans indicated that procedures, when perceived as intrusive, negatively affected their event experience. Now, we're at a time where threat actors are getting more sophisticated, leading to the risks and threats themselves evolving. The change in that threat actor landscape would indicate to me that security teams have a responsibility to enhance their digital threat monitoring things like social media, service web, for threatening language that could impact the event. But I think the stat that I shared highlights a key tension, that too much security can impact the fan experience. How do you approach striking the right balance, giving fans a sense of security that they expect, but also avoiding the perception of being too intrusive or even big brother, so to speak?
That's a great question. And my response, you will find, hopefully you'll find this interesting. It is largely cultural. Each culture has its own expectations of what the security posture should look like. Americans in particular have a culture in which we like to see that there is a degree of organization and a security presence, but we don't like to see something that we perceive as police state, or if you will, too intrusive. I'm sure that the statistics that you just shared were generated by an American audience. That's our nature. That's how we approach these events. So we, in particular, as American security professionals, really try to develop a framework, and I use this I mentioned this previously, about a balanced security plan. You want to be sufficiently reassuring in the perception of order and if you will, the visible presence of security personnel who are going to come and assist if there is an issue that requires their aid. But you need to be also mindful of the fact that people don't want to be intruded upon, hence the popularity. We're moving more and more to ticketless systems, to biometric systems for entry and access that literally just are going to eventually allow people to pass through based on biometric identification. And I think that's a really good, positive development. It's going to be good and positive for crowd control, to be sure, but also for folks who are trying to ensure the safety and security. The whole social media monitoring aspect, the physical surveillance, a lot of the if you will, the imagery surveillance, that's not in question anymore. That's an absolute necessity, because we've gotten to the level where every stadium has at least 50 to 100, if you will, cameras looking at folks. They have greater incorporation of artificial intelligence to try and ensure that they are effectively managing all the data that they are bringing in. The challenge for security professionals is more and more about data management and how do we adequately process all of the information that we are now being able to collect. It's a very interesting development, because you can have great technology, but if you don't have the attendant organizational skills or the organizational capabilities, it's not going to translate into the effective security posture that you're trying to achieve.
There's so much loaded in that. There's so many components, and I think working in OSINT, we see a lot of like too much information coming through, but so much more widespread when we think of it, everything that goes into event security from the physical to the online. So thank you so much, John. Now, I think we've talked a lot about like in event security, and a lot of us think of monitoring for an event, threats that are happening directed to it. So, you know, again, simplifying and think of a few examples, you know, coming in and bringing in or identifying altercations in the crowd, or, you know, bringing in flare guns to disrupt, or, you know, streakers coming through the stands. But can you tell me about a time when you were dealing with a situation where it was actually activity outside of the event or venue that impacted your game plan?
So we have been in situations where we have been working with partners, and our partners, it was as much us advising partners about what we perceived in the area of their event that caused them to change their posture. And I don't want to get into the particulars too much, but it caused them to change their physical security posture to ensure that they were demonstrating a deterrence for the event. So that's one that I could definitely cite. I also wanted to just bring up, by the way, today is the 10th anniversary of the 2015 attack in Paris. And there are all sorts of commemorations in France today. And that was a three-pronged attack, and it started with an attack on the sports stadium. There was a friendly match going on that day, an international match with the French president in attendance, and three individuals tried to go up to the stadium, and they did detonate explosives. But because they were not able to gain access, there was only one person killed in that part. But it was a three-pronged attack. It was really, really traumatic. And it was kind of a 9/11 event for the French. And it just goes to show about this level of coordination that can happen in some of the threat environments, and also some of the situations in which, if you will, inadequate alerting on it, because a lot of these attacks were coordinated through social media that wasn't detected until after the fact. There was another incident in the United States that comes to mind that I had some participation in. There was an attack on an art gallery in Garland, Texas in 2015. And those folks had been coordinating the attack on social media. And the police and law enforcement authorities in Texas were alerted in advance. And when the individuals attempted the attack, if you will, the perimeter had been secured and folks were ready. And it just demonstrated, wow, that advanced alerting completely changed the equation on the attack. The attackers were killed. There was only one person who was injured. It was, it was an example of how they were able to effectively use advanced warning to preempt a potentially very lethal situation.
John, thank you for giving us the opportunity to remember such a difficult event many years ago, and a sobering reminder of why we do what we do, and changing the story to be proactive and saving lives. So thank you for that. Now, going into 2026, many command centers are focusing on FIFA strategies. So looking forward again to the event coming forward in 2026. But it touches those not just responsible for FIFA assets and delegates, but also for those responsible for protection infrastructure in the locales and matches where they will occur. Now, what advice would you give here, knowing what you know about today's threat landscape?
I would say, what's the size of your stakeholder community? You really need to know. You really need to know the folks who are vested there are so many people that are vested in the success of any kind of, if you will, professional sports security. And there is also information that can be shared back and forth. Businesses in and around, let's just say, a stadium venue. They can give you information on foot traffic. They can give you information on, wow, these are the busiest hours. These are times when we really feel overwhelmed. And conversely, those folks who are running the venues can be sharing information about their security. Hey, this is what we've seen sort of from security. And that exchange is completely mutually beneficial. Those are the types of things we can talk about. One other thing, and I should have mentioned it before, but I want to mention it, is that this whole changing environment with regard to, I'm very comfortable in talking about terrorism, but what I also want to talk about are these highly personalized threats that we see on social media. I don't know if everyone's aware, but you may recall, but we had at least 2 very serious threats to professional baseball players this year that came through social media that literally placed threats on the players and their families because of performance, if you can believe that. And it became so serious that the teams needed to contact law enforcement. They needed to contact, again, social media companies about it. And then they needed to give the players 24/7 security coverage. So we're in an area where a lot of these kinds of threats have become increasingly personalized. And that is a really different experience. And one other development that's kind of interesting, and again, this could happen with the number of different FIFA venues within the United States, is you have a number of different social media influencers who are saying, hey, I'm going to be going to this event. And then you have an attendant crowd not really interested in the event, but they're there for the attendees. And I'm not talking the participants, the attendees. We've also had instances where some folks, influencers, have tried to generate promotional activities tied to some of those events. And those are not things that would normally appear on a security professional's landscape. They become very emergent, and then you need to address them very, very quickly. So I guess the need for speed is something that is increasing more and more with the requirements for successful event security.
Okay, thank you so much, John. So we're going to open it up for Q&A, and we're very close, if not a little bit over time. But before we do, for those of you listening, not only thank you again, John, for giving us such a wealth of information today, but he's also agreed to work with Liferaft and offer a complimentary 1-hour consultation on your event security programs. So on the screen, you'll see a QR code. So feel free to scan that, and it will take you to a page where you'll be able to take us up on this incredibly generous offer. So again, thank you so much, John. While we have that up on the screen, I do have one question in the chat here that we'll highlight and then we'll break for today. So this comes from Tim. What are some nuances to think about when it comes to international travel? Our teams are traveling abroad, for example, and what do they need to be doing differently?
I know this, Tim, thanks for that question. Tim, I'll give you a question. I'll give you an answer about security, and I'll give you an answer about procedure. You need to ensure, obviously, so I do a lot of briefings to folks who are sending out teams internationally. And some folks have remarkably little knowledge about the areas that they're going into or entering, or the cultural norms. So one thing I would do is ensure that you take the time, and if necessary, just do it one-on-one if possible, to sit down with travelers and ensure that they're aware about the environment, about the, if you will, the nuances of the security of the country that they're going into. And the procedural thing I'll mention to you is sometimes many folks are never aware that members of their team might be nationals or have an international passport or have some other factor that they do not take into account when they are traveling, and then you encounter some kind of unexpected difficulty at border control points. So having greater awareness, again, just stepping through, if you will, the passports of the folks who are the travelers in your team. I know that sounds like a kind of trivial thing, but you would be surprised. It, 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 it flares up quite frequently. So hope that's helpful.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, John, again, for stepping in and being able to speak with me today. I know this was incredibly valuable to our listeners, but everybody on the line, thank you so much for joining. We look forward to seeing you at our next Security Spotlight.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, everyone.